Friends, welcome to virtual Sunday worship at First Parish in Framingham. Thank you for being a part of our virtual community. We make this space and this time holy and sacred by intention and attention. I'm the Reverend Aaron Stockwell, and it is my honor to serve as your senior minister. First Parish in Framingham is a welcoming congregation. This means we celebrate and welcome people of all sexual orientations, races, ages, gender identities, abilities, or beliefs. So whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, whoever you love, you, dear one, are welcome here. Unitarian Universalism is a faith of covenant and not creed. We honor the value of spiritual freedom and diversity. We have no set statement of doctrine, but we gather as a covenanted community to search for truth and how it applies to ethical living. Thank you this morning to Ronnie DeComo, who decorated the chancel for our service. It is dedicated and decorated in living memory of her beloved sister, Pat DeComo. Friends, since 1701, people have gathered as this community, seeking peace and seeking meaning. Those people are a little bit like you. You belong right here. Maybe only for the next hour, but we hope for longer. You are a part of this community, and we are so happy to have you with us. Our virtual coffee hour will happen as soon as our service concludes. There will be information on how to join on the final screen. We light the chalice with these words by Deborah Falk. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundations of freedom and reason and welcome. It is a faith that is sustained by kindness and justice, a faith that envisions a world flourishing with equality for all people, a faith that demands living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. This tiny flame is the symbol of the spark of all this within each one of us. As the children of our congregation light their chalice, and as I light the chalice in our sanctuary, I invite you to light a candle. These physical rituals that we undergo apart help bind us together. After you have lit the chalice in your home, I invite you to type into the chat box, "The chalice is lit in our home," or "The chalice is lit in my home."
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue.
Please join us in our words of affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church.
The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God. There is going to be some crazy change coming our way. In the next few weeks, we're going to find out who the next president of the United States is. In the next few weeks, we're going to find out whether or not we're going to have a rough winter or maybe a mild one. In the next few weeks, we don't quite know what change is coming our way. And sometimes when there's change, there are people who wish to express themselves, to talk about the change, to talk about what they are afraid of or what they are excited about. And sometimes people march. This is a story I want to share with you by Tessa Allen. And it says, sometimes people march to resist injustice, to stand in solidarity, or to inspire hope. And Tessa dedicates this book for my family, who have always encouraged me to be feisty and curious. Sometimes ants march. Sometimes bands march. And sometimes people march. Marching is something people do together when they want to resist injustice or when they notice the need for change. I wonder what things these family here are noticing. Maybe all that trash, the pollution. People march for many reasons. People march for the things they care about and people they love. People march for the health of their bodies and their communities and the world. The sign says, protect water. People march for the freedom to love and live and learn. Sometimes people carry signs to share their stories of resistance. All these many different signs here. Votes for women. That happened 100 years ago this year. Stop the war. This one says climate justice now. And this one says rise up. And the girl is holding a sunflower of her own. Here I see a pride and the transgender pride flag together, the heart. This one here says access is a civil right. This family is holding a sign that says Black Lives Matter. Here, we will love and protect each other. That one says act up, fight back, with a pink triangle on it. Over here it says refugees are welcome here. These ladies say picket, ladies, tailors, strikers on their sashes. This one says we are the 99%. This one says march for our future, and it has the world looking like it's starting to melt like an ice cream cone. Maybe because it's getting too hot. This one says, march for our lives. And this one here says, I am a man. People resist in many ways. Sometimes people resist with their voices. They might resist with words, or with songs, or art. These words say, show me what democracy looks like. And this group of people look like they're saying, this is what democracy looks like. And the words on the typewriter say, the way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. It's a quote by Ida B. Wells. I see a mural here, somebody singing a song. People resist with meetings. They resist by standing up or sitting down or taking a knee. It isn't always easy. Feet get tired, arms get tired, hearts and hopes get tired. Sometimes problems seem too big or complex. That complicated building. Looks like government on top. But we do not march alone. Ants are stronger together. We're going to lift that entire slice of watermelon. Bands are louder together. People are more powerful together. This one says, our home, we won't move. And the sign says the Asian Community Center. And these people are linking arms together. Sometimes from feelings of fear or anger or injustice comes the hope for change. Sometimes great change starts small with a brave question. Maybe your question. A question that calls people together. And together, we find the courage to march. As I look out on this crowd here in this illustration, I see all the signs that we saw before in the book. Protect water, votes for women, all are welcome, Black Lives Matter, hope. So I hope that no matter what change comes our way in the next few weeks or months, that you come together with people who think the same way you do, because together there is strength and there is hope.
To this tapestry of a community, we each bring our joys and our sorrows, our milestones, happy and sad occasions. We know that joy shared is joy expanded, and sorrow shared can feel as though someone is lifting a burden. There will be prompts on the screen that will give better order to our sharing. Do remember this, friends. In this virtual space, privacy cannot be guaranteed. So do feel free to get in touch with me if there is something a little too tender to share that you wish to let me and others know about.
There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. We rest in this love. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. We rest in this love.
We now enter into this time for contemplation and meditation. O Spirit of life and love, named and unnamed, but who calls each one of us by our true first name, which is beloved. As I film this, it is snowing. And I give thanks that I am able to be here for the beginning of what I hope is a beautiful New England winter. Watching the snow fall on the landscape. I give thanks that I have a warm place and shelter and good food to eat and a loving family. I know that it did not have to be this way. I give thanks for my life. I know that in our community there are those who go without shelter, without heat, without food, without love, without peace in their lives. They could be you. Also, people who are mourning, people who are ill, people who are healing, people who are in recovery from addictions, and people who live in the midst of the turmoil that is an addiction. May we remind them of the truth that as they are loved, they're loved. May we be love's hands, listening to them, listening to us, each other, when we need it. May we also feel comfortable asking for help. I know that's tough, but sometimes we need help. As we are on the eve of our presidential election, I pray for peace. I pray for peace for those who are voting and those who have already voted. I pray for peace in our nation. As I hear of people carrying guns, saying that they are protecting the polls, but really they're intimidating voters. May the days after the election bring peace to our world, to our country, to our state, and to our town. May we also work to bring peace to all of the war-torn parts of the world, and may we find ways to live our deepest values of bringing peace, of proclaiming to those who are told they are not enough, or they are different, or they are less than, that no, you are not. Your life matters. Whether they are black, or trans, or gay or lesbian, no matter their age, no matter their abilities, they are loved, and may we find ways to let them know about that truth. I pray for peace of all of the candidates who are running for office, from state representatives all the way up to our president and candidates for president. May they find time to sit in quiet and ponder the decisions that they must make. Sometimes our humanity bubbles up in ways that we don't expect, or maybe we do expect, but it can feel unpleasant. Our imperfections come to the surface when we are quick to temper, when we say something that we didn't think through how it would be received. May we know this truth, that we are beloved. I'm talking to you. You are loved and lovable, not in spite of these imperfections, but because of them. And there's always room to grow into a better version of yourself. There is always space to move back into right relationship. I say these words and do all things for love's sake. As we move out of this time for contemplation, let us close by taking 3 comfortable breaths. As you breathe that first breath, may you feel peaceful. As you breathe the second breath, may you feel present. And as you breathe the third breath, may you feel powerful.
Good morning. On behalf of Pies on the Common Committee, I'd like to thank everyone for our successful yet unconventional 30th year, with a special thank you to Reverend Aaron. Due to COVID-19, we had to rethink Pies. 4 months of Zoom meetings, and we had the same question: what are we going to do? So we decided to write a letter simply requesting donations. Thanks to Laura Stone's suggestion and generosity, Pies had 0 expenses. She donated the cost for all paper stamps, stickers, envelopes for a personalized appeal. 205 hand-addressed envelopes and letters were mailed, messages posted on First Parish and community websites. Then we held our breath and crossed our fingers. The response was overwhelming, beyond our expectations. As of October 29th, the total is an amazing $10,801.98. This year we missed the pie breakers, who brought hundreds of home-baked pies the day before to Scott Hall, the bakers of 150 loaves of sweetbreads, the makers of 50 pounds of candy and fudge, everything getting wrapped and ribboned to be sold. We missed the apple peelers, who peel and slice 8.5 bushels of apples, for Sandy Porter and Holly Willette, her sister, to bake 100 pies in one day. We missed the people who dropped by with a check in lieu of baking, or dropped by just to say hello. We missed the 50 to 60 volunteers who began arriving 6 a.m. on the day of pies to set up tents and decorations, carrying tables and chairs from Scott Hall across Vernon Street. The ones who stay all day, selling pies, food, and drinks. The worker bees who come especially for cleanup. Everyone who prays for no rain. We were indoors only once in 2005. This year, Pies 2005 was not about the committee or the letter, it's about each of you. The donations were uniquely varied, like you. You who attend every Sunday or rarely. You who are always present in spirit. You who moved out of state years ago and donated with warm memories. You who donated to celebrate a birthday, the age of your children, the number of years at First Parish, your pets, the price of a pie. 31415 from the lover of math, $30 for 30 years. contributions from friends of friends and people in the community. A check with a note from a parishioner. I'm really happy not to bake this year. Each donation took time and effort on your part to respond and was gratefully received, whether it was $5 or the anonymous 500. The response was overwhelming. October 29th, the total $10,801.98. Every donation is a support for pies and a gift of love for First Parish. See you next year, October 16th, 2021 for Pies 31. Thank you.
The ongoing work of this congregation during this time of virtual gathering depends on your generosity. The morning offering will now be joyfully given and gratefully received as I ponder these words by my colleague, the Reverend Kayla Parker. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. We are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure that the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and for our world than they could have done alone. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and the mission of this congregation. May we give in hope and in love. The Reverend Mark Bellatini, in his poem Election Promises, writes this: I hear the polls are going to be open on Tuesday, all day. Good. I certainly intend to go to them. I certainly invite you to go to them as well and vote. But today, I say the polls are not just open on Tuesday. I say that they are open every day, every hour, even here, even now, right now. I am going to vote for the robin's egg sky, the vanilla clouds, the purple shadow spreading under the ginkgo tree. I'm going to vote for tulips and redbuds. I'm going to vote for love that does not have to run in someone else's circles in order to be love. I'm going to vote the homeless into homes. I'm going to vote the uneducated into classrooms that teach them in the way they learn best, not the way that would be most convenient. I'm going to vote the sick into healing. I'm going to vote the lost into belonging. I'm going to vote right now for the right to dream of a world where the word politics doesn't stop me in my tracks, and where the word honor still has a few good meanings left. I am going to vote right now for the power of free people to actually be free, no matter who they are, no matter who has abandoned them, no matter who hates them. I actually am going to vote for love. I'm going to vote for truthfulness as the norm, not the exception. I'm going to vote for a world that doesn't vote for killing, control, and swagger. I'm going to vote for you, and I'm going to vote for me right now, right here, silently, but for real. Voting is at the core of our 244-year-old democracy. Voting and participating in the democratic process is at the core of our centuries-old faith. Our fifth principle states that we will affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Now, we haven't always had the fifth principle in its current wording, of course. The need to protect, promote, and defend democracy has been in our denomination for many years. In 1917, the Universalist General Convention passed this declaration of social principles. It included this: "We therefore declare the primal task of the Church of today to be the reconstruction of the world's civilizations in terms of justice, peace, and righteousness, so that the spiritual life of all may develop to its fullest capacity." It goes on to say that the Universalist Church offers a complete program for completing humanity. First, it offers an economic order, which shall give to every human being an equal share in the common gifts of God, and in addition, all that they shall earn by their labor. Second, a social order, in which there shall be equal rights for all, special privilege for none, the help of the strong for the weak, until the weak become strong. Third, a moral order, in which all human law and action shall be an expression of the moral order of the universe. Now, later when our denominations merged, these were the principles: to affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human being, the dignity of man, and the use of the democratic method in human relationships. Now, back in the day, there was a thing called the Election Day Sermon. It was a big deal indeed. Many of the buildings our congregations met in here in New England were also town meeting houses. We were where democracy took place. They often celebrated this day with an Election Day sermon, which would outline why voting was a Christian responsibility. The sermon would often close with advice to the elected officials, as they were often there in the congregation on Election Day. Remember, this was when our denomination was solidly a Christian denomination. The Reverend Barbara Brown Zickman explains the Election Day sermon in this way, reminding us that many of us spend many hours each week watching television or listening to the radio or reading stuff on the internet now. In 18th century New England, however, the most important public oral communication, even entertainment, was the sermon. Reverend Zickman reminds us that unlike sermons in the Church of England, which were supposed to please and inspire, New England Congregationalists inherited a rational tradition and argued that a good sermon was to inform and convince. In colonial New England, the words of the preacher carried great influence. Now, in Massachusetts, Election Day was a colony-wide celebration, usually involving cannon fire, military ceremonies, then a procession of all of the elected officials to the nearby church. Then, following the sermon, they would go and they would vote. Zickman finishes by explaining that there were two usual points in these sermons. I'll summarize those points. First of all, they asserted that political systems were established by the divine and citizens to promote the common good. Scripture states that government is necessary, but is never perfect. The second thing that those sermons would do was that people were encouraged to promise to follow those they had elected, and rulers were to promise to act for the good of all. Now, it seems there was also a different genre of Election Day sermons, which were preached by ministers directly to the elected officials. These were given in our Commonwealth from 1634 to 1884. Another source describes the sermons like this: it was the custom of certain New England states to open each year's session of the legislature with an annual election sermon. Those sermons had titles like New England Pleaded With, The Happiness of People, The Only Sure Way, God's Sovereign Government, and Rulers Are Terror. Now, the first minister of our congregation, John Swift, gave an election sermon in 1732 to the General Court. There's a lot about John Swift that I find very disagreeable. I read the sermon and I found it tedious, not just because of the archaic typeface it was printed in, but I found it really challenging to translate and put much of Reverend Swift's 18th century Christianity into context. His sermon is based on a passage from Luke chapter 18, verse 9. And if it bear fruit, well, and if not, then thou shalt cut it down. In a fair bit of this sermon, Swift rails against the apparent vices of the time, including lewdness, excessive drinking, profaning the Lord's day, and swearing. He preaches about the need for reformation, which I don't think is about the Protestant Reformation, but rather about reforming and rehabilitating. He imagines a need to embody and renew the covenants they signed on to when they joined the parish. Indeed, remember, they called joining a church owning the covenant. He wrote, "And when persons own the covenant in order to receive church privileges, they publicly enter into the solemn obligation about this work. When they join, they make a commitment to live the values in their daily lives." So now, remember when I mentioned that as part of those election day sermons, the preacher would give advice and counsel to the elected officials? I have to then wonder, what advice would I give to our elected officials? Remembering, of course, that while a lot of our attention is on the presidential election, there are 435 spots in the House of Representatives open, senators and governors, and numerous other state positions are up for election as well. What advice would I give them? Well, this isn't a complete list, of course, but I would remind them to take care of their bodies, their families, and the staff that work with them. I'd remind them to nurture friendships and to be humble, to admit when they have made a mistake. I would remind them to surround themselves with counselors and mentors who will tell them when they are wrong, not just people who will say, "Yes, I agree." I would remind them to listen to people who are different than they are, from different genders, different skin colors, different abilities, different sexualities, different classes, and different religions. I'd remind them to take care of this earth, to protect it, because it's the only planet we have, and our children and their children will have. I will remind them to seek to protect the voiceless. I would urge them that when the going gets tough, when it seems like the budget won't get balanced, or when the constituents are not happy, or when there is oppression and injustice in our world, to take the long view, to imagine the future. I would remind them to govern with care, pondering every decision, to govern with peace. I would ask that they govern from a place of love, an expansive love, and an evolving love. I would remind them that they now govern on behalf of everyone in their district, city, state, or country, not just the people who voted for them. Yes, they might have been running as Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, or Green Party, but now they are our elected officials. I would also remind them that when people seek to hold them accountable to the promises they made, or when we feel that they are not representing all views, that they who govern on our behalf listen, to not dismiss opposing viewpoints, to not demean the other side. Now, I recognize that these words can seem a little Pollyanna-ish. Oh well. I call it engaging in prophetic imagination. Walter Brueggemann explains it this way. He writes that the prophet engages in a futuring fantasy. The prophet does not ask if the vision can be implemented, for questions of implementation are of no consequence until the vision can be imagined. The imagination must come before the implementation. Our culture is competent to implement almost anything and to imagine nothing. The same royal consciousness that makes it possible to implement anything and everything is the one that shrinks imagination, because imagination is a danger. Thus, every totalitarian regime is frightened of the artist. It is the vocation of the prophet to keep alive the ministry of imagination, to keep on conjuring, to keep on proposing futures alternate to the single one the king wants to urge as the only thinkable one. And I would remind us, the voters, that our democratic duty does not end the second we put the ballot in the collection box Tuesday or whenever we voted early. Our democratic duty never really ends. It is up to us as Unitarian Universalists to continue to voice our views, to share them with our leaders, and to remind all that there is a religious left, there is a progressive voice. We must hold our elected officials accountable, write letters, go to protests, go to hearings, or call them on the phone. And when that doesn't work, we have to work to create a world. We have to work to create that world. We have to create that world that we have imagined. Of course, frequently there are barriers erected that prevent all who are able from voting. I really appreciate what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said in his 1957 speech, "Give us the ballot." He writes, "So long as I do not firmly and irrevocably possess the right to vote, I do not possess myself. I cannot make up my mind. It is made up for me. I cannot live as a democratic citizen, observing the laws I have helped to enact. I only submit to the edict of others." You know this, friends, there is so much more that I could say going further than that. I could mention voter ID laws and the oppression that they cause. I could mention voter suppression and intimidation. I could mention working to do voter registration drives. We are a little bit late for that. We must remember that the people who will live with the decisions that thousands or millions of people made, decisions that you might not agree with. How do you go on? How do you take care of yourself? I tried to write something, but I have to say, I'm too nervous. No matter who is elected, they will be inheriting a country that is starkly divided. And frankly, I worry about it. I worry about rising tensions in our country. Yes, an elected official may get elected, but I worry about what that will do. Will that be a spark in the powder keg? What is our role in rebuilding democracy? Not the institution of elected officials, but the voice of the people. What is our role in healing the heart of democracy? We'll get to that in next week's sermon. We'll get there, and we will have a better sense of the work that we have to do, hopefully over this coming week. I close with these words, these wise words from the Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner. She says, "For now, I urge you to take good care of yourselves and each other this week. Be extra kind. Turn the news, the TV, or the computer off for a few minutes. Promise yourself that you will only look at the 538 polls once or twice a day. Make plans to go vote with a friend or a loved one, or figure out how you're going to do that safely. Proudly wear your I voted pin or sticker. If you have a yoga practice, a meditation practice, a bubble bath practice, whatever keeps you centered, do it this week. As you are able to do safely, be with others on Tuesday night. Reach out to others on Wednesday for a discussion, not of the results, but of how we are doing together. On Tuesday, if it relaxes you, bake a cake, cookies, or a pie. Pray not just for your candidate, but for America coming together. Remind yourselves that regardless of the outcome, the new day begins. Take solace in the fact, Hafner writes, that there have been other difficult elections, other elections defined by hatred, other times that have scared progressives about the very soul of our country. And so far, at least our aspirations as a country have come through, indivisible and regardless of who wins. We know that we are still called to work for a world with liberty and justice for all. So my friends watching this, wherever you are watching this, are you ready? We have work to do. If you wish, join us on Wednesday from 1 to 3 and 6 to 8 for some drop-in Vesper services that I'll be hosting on Zoom right here in the sanctuary, but on Zoom. I hope it'll be a place of solace. We'll follow a very loose cycle of song, poem, silence, and conversation. But no matter who you are, as long as you plan on being kind, you are welcome to join us. We'll have information in the care post about how to join. Let us remember that it is our job to be love in the world, to engage in the practice of imagining the world as we want it to be, because every present is the past's imagination. May we remember that hope and change is coming. What do we need to imagine? May it be so.
Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? 'Cause I know from brokenness there's hope. I know from brokenness there's hope. Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? To be prepared. I know I'm scared to be prepared. I know I'm scared. I know from brokenness there's hope. I know from brokenness there's hope. Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? To be change is coming. I know. What do we need to imagine? To be prepared. I know. From I'm scared to be prepared. I know. From I'm scared. 'Cause I know change is coming. What do we need to imagine? I know change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? 'Cause I know from brokenness there's hope. I know from brokenness there's hope. Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? 'Cause I know change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine?
I close with these words of benediction from Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. I now invite you to extinguish the flames you have lit in your homes as I extinguish the flame of our chalice. As the flame goes out, let the smoke waft through the air for just a moment. And I invite you to type into the chat box, "I carry the flame."